Welcome to Your Health is Your Wealth. My name is Argo Duenas and I'm your host for today. I'm also the owner of Back to Nature Health and Wellness Center, a local holistic center that has served the Baltimore, D.C., Virginia, Eastern Shore area for over 30 years. The mission of this program is not only to provide health promoting information, but to present positive images and inspiring interviews. I am so excited today to have as my special guest today a phenomenal woman. She's a native Annapolitan, and she found her voice at a very early age. She is a community organizer, an activist, an advocate, a change agent, a paradigm shifter. She is here today to share her personal story, to inspire us to keep hope alive, to speak about the social ills plaguing our communities here in Annapolis, and to offer us real solutions. Welcome, Tony Pratt.
Thank you.
You truly are a household name in Annapolis.
Yes, I am.
Thank you for taking time out from your busy schedule today to be with me.
Absolutely.
To really talk about some important issues that's facing our community. But
Yes.
First of all, to give our viewers an upfront and personal interview with you and your story. I've always been touched, moved, and inspired by you. Not only me, but the community, because you're so passionate about saving our children and making a difference in the community.
Yes.
Before we talk about some of the social ills today here in Annapolis, because we do have some serious issues, let's talk about Tony. Can you tell us something about your family and your early childhood and what it was like growing up in Annapolis? Because I'm a native Annapolitan too, so I have fond memories.
So I do also. So growing up in Annapolis for me was pretty good. I went to Tyler Heights Elementary School. I went to West Annapolis Elementary School. I lived in public housing. I lived with my parents and my 4 siblings. And living back then in Annapolis was a lot different compared to living here now. I lived on the street after we moved out of public housing. We moved out of public housing because actually the mortgage that my dad was going to be paying was less than public housing. And he always taught us to look at public housing as a stepping stone.
Absolutely.
When we finally moved out of public housing into our house, we lived in Primrose, which was a street of predominantly Caucasians. Mm-hmm. So Tyler Heights dynamics were different then. So it was mostly Caucasians in that school. And I can remember being bullied at a really early age about some tennis shoes that I had on because we couldn't afford the latest stuff. So I got bullied, and it was that point that I found my voice. I knew I was always different, but I knew that I had the power to speak up against ill. And at an early age, I spoke up about things that weren't going right.
And this was in elementary school?
This was in elementary school at Tyler Heights when this bullying occurred. And it kind of proceeded in middle school, mm-hmm. but I think at that point I had established who I was, mm-hmm. and that I wasn't going to take anything.
Where was your middle school, Tony?
My middle school was Annapolis Junior High, mm-hmm. which is now Annapolis Middle School.
Right.
And I went to Annapolis Junior High until the 8th grade. And I had some friends who lived in different communities in the neighborhood. And we could all integrate into all of the different neighborhoods in Annapolis is one thing that I liked. Because it wasn't if you lived in Annapolis Garden or you lived in Bywater or you lived in Newtown that you couldn't go here or you couldn't go there. But it was more so a family, and we took care of each other, and we looked out for each other. Although it was some mischief, we always settled it. We always went home at the end of the day.
So would you say back in the day, Tony, there was a lot more unity and love in the community?
Absolutely. I believe that back in the day, we all looked out for each other.
Absolutely.
I can remember getting in trouble down the street. And before I got home, my parents knew that I was in trouble. And them having the security to know that the person who was down the street could discipline me before I got up the street. So we kind of like looked out for each other. And the old cliche is, it takes a village. It really did take a village. And I think we were better because of that village.
Absolutely. You know, my family came from the old Fourth Ward, so I have truly fond memories. It was segregated, but the community was self-sufficient. We thrived. There were black businesses. We supported one another. There was a lot of love and unity in the community, and it was through desegregation and urban renewal. We call it removal because it totally displaced an entire community that has created some of the issues that we have today.
Yes.
Talk about your family. Let's talk about your family. I remember your grandfather was very prominent,
Yes.
and he was a minister.
Yes.
I think was he the founder of Helping Hand?
Yes, my grandfather, Reverend Floyd Snowden, who worked at Asbury
Yes.
United Methodist Church on West Street, and was also the founder of the Helping Hand
Right.
Income, which was on the corner of Clay Street.
I remember.
Which he would go out in the communities and take food and offer a helping hand to anybody who needed it. And my grandmother, Martha Snowden, was also a trailblazer and helping in the communities, also a community voice and a community activist. My mom, Martha Snowden, and my dad, Clarence Strong. My dad is a military veteran, and so I'm just proud of my family because they laid the roots and the legacy for me to be able to have the voice and to look out for the community like I do.
I truly, truly agree with that the apple doesn't fall too far from the tree. Because I remember
Yes.
your grandmother, Miss Martha, up at Asbury Church, very active. Your grandfather, he did outreach before
Yes.
any of the churches got
Yes.
into outreach.
Yes.
You know, he had a heart for people.
Yes.
And so that seed has been passed down to you. The mantle really
Yes.
has been passed down to you. What were your goals, dreams, and aspirations as a teenager and young adult, Tony?
So my goals were, I always knew, like I keep saying earlier on, that my purpose was to take care of people. I didn't know how that played out. I didn't know what that meant. But it started to unfold when I met my now husband when I was 15 years old. And I was with my husband all my life. And my husband was an addict. And I didn't know what that meant. I wasn't introduced to drugs. I didn't know, what it was all about. And my husband started using more and more, and I became an enabler. And I soon found out an enabler was a codependent, which means I was basically addicted to my spouse. I can remember going into crack houses to look for him. I can remember making up excuses of why he didn't go to work. I can remember making up excuses why he did what he did in his families. And I didn't think anything was wrong with me because I wasn't an addict. I wasn't getting high. And I can remember going to a program called Nar-Non because something was going on with me and I needed to find out what it was. And I remember going to the first meeting, and the young lady in the meeting told me that you're sicker than him. And I left. And I didn't go back for a little while. And I couldn't grasp what she was saying. But when I finally grasped what she was saying, to know that this disease isn't an individual disease, but it is a family disease. And thus I found out who I was and my role in this thing called substance abuse disease.
Well, that has touched my family. I've experienced that personally, Tony, and I can relate. When we do the best that we can do
Yes.
with the knowledge that we have, at the time.
Yes.
It is the love and the compassion that we have for our loved ones to try to save them from themselves.
Yes.
But if we didn't get the understanding and the training of how to deal with it,
Yes.
you do the best you can.
Absolutely.
You don't beat up on yourself. But what I learned over the years was I was an enabler.
Yes.
And I had to take a step back and do tough love.
Yes.
And that's what I did. And that changed the whole dynamics.
Yes.
So I'm here to say and to touch and agree with you that God is real.
He is.
Because that's who we look to.
Absolutely.
The God within.
Absolutely.
And God will arrange and the right people at the
Yes.
right time to give us
Absolutely.
information that we need to proceed.
Yes.
So now that we're talking about substance abuse, you have been very passionate, been very vocal, and been very active in the community,
Yes.
raising health awareness about that. So there are quite a few organizations that you are actively involved with, and we'll talk about that in a minute. But since we're talking about substance abuse now, let's talk about the one that you've been involved with, the NAM.
Sure.
Okay.
So before I get to NAM, I have to tell you a little bit about my husband.
Sure.
So 30 years later, my husband is clean.
Praise God.
My husband is a minister at our church, and we also started a support group for drugs and for addicts and co-addicts. It's called Desire Ministry. We started it 8 years ago. It started out in our church. We would have, the people who have issues in the church. We partnered with the Chrysalis House, who used to come to the meetings, and then we branched out into community in Clay Street in Bay Ridge. But now we're taking our organization more abroad and doing education and resource training. And we've partnered with NAM, Naptown Anti-Dope Movement, which is in collaboration with the city of Annapolis.
Before we're going to stop there
Okay.
for a moment, because we want to talk about your church, the
Okay.
name of your church,
Okay.
because first I'm going to let you talk about First Christian
Okay.
and the phenomenal things that you all are doing in there.
Okay.
And your husband had a first sermon, right?
Yes.
Okay, I did see that on Facebook. I
Yes.
follow you religiously, so let's talk about that, okay?
Yeah, so a while ago, my husband was ordained. Last October, he was ordained as a
Wonderful.
minister at First Christian Community Church, and he had his first sermon. He also did a sermon on last week. He's been very active. We've been very active in our church. I am a deaconess in our church. I do outreach in our church. We are a part of ACT, which is an organization that we are a part of as a church. And now we're actually ready to venture out in the community called Bywater and adopt Bywater as our community to upbuild the community and work with the community to see what they need so they can progress on and move to the next level.
Wow. So your husband, you're both are testimonies
Yes.
of what's possible
Yes.
and what God is able to do when we ask for help.
And
So
I think
that-
it's awesome because our pastor, Dr. Karen Vanessa Johnson,
Yes.
allows us to do outreach. That is part of our mission, to go back into the communities. And I believe within my spirit and my soul, that's what's missing in our communities, because that was a legacy and a foundation when I grew up, was the church.
Absolutely.
Supporting and rallying around communities when they
Absolutely.
need it. So I think us getting back out in the community will be pivotal for the process of moving forward in the communities.
Well, I truly believe that you've been called for a time like this, because when you speak, you speak truth to power,
Yes.
unapologetically. I've seen you in action. But now, let's talk about NAM. And I went to the first meeting at the American Legion, and it was so informative and so educational. I went out there with a wealth of information, but there are a lot of resources that was available. So I think there have been, how many?
There was
But
five. There was
okay,
five.
Okay.
So NAM is called the Naptown Anti-Dope Movement.
Okay.
It was birthed from the city of Annapolis under the leadership of Adetola Ajayi,
Who is he?
which is the African American liaison for the city of Annapolis.
Okay.
If you looked at the statistics with this health crisis, this drug crisis, I call it a public health crisis.
Yes, it is.
But if you look at the statistics in the county, they were a lot different than the statistics that we were seeing in the city. In the county, you had younger white males, 20 and under, 20 and up. But in the city, you had older black African American males, 45 and older. And we noticed that it was 5 hot spots in the city. Hot spots are places where overdoses were taking place. And we identified that those places were mostly public housing communities. So together with the cities and the OME, Office of Emergency Management, we set out to bring resources and education to those communities that are usually left behind. So we went to 5 different communities and we brought education and resources and Narcan training and CPR training to a community has been uninvested who doesn't know about a lot of the resources that are available. And that's been our mission since November. The next portion of this we would like to call NAMCAN. So NAMCAN is more of a more intimate meeting in the communities to get people more involved to be able to take care of their own communities. Because it's going to be a point in time where we're going to leave. We want to leave them self-sufficient and self-sustaining to be able to carry this on and have the tools that they need to be able to take care of their communities.
So what were the 5 hot spots?
So the 5 hot spots were Eastport and Harbor House, Robinwood, Bay Ridge, Newtown 20, and Woodside. So those were the 5 hot spots within the city of Annapolis.
So are there any upcoming events now with what you just talked about?
So the NAMCAN is in the planning the planning stages to determine where we're going to go, what exactly are we going to try to target, who are we going to target, and how we're going to actually lay out this part of the program.
Okay, all right. So it's evolving.
It's evolving, yes.
What about safe houses and places where people can go? Because my granddaughter's best friend died of overdose. He was supposed to graduate last year. I think it was last year, right in front of his family's home.
Wow.
Yes.
So we do have safe stations.
Safe stations.
Safe stations are in the county. Safe stations are police departments and fire stations that anybody can go who needs help with addiction, who feel like they're helpless or ODing, who need resources and help. They can go to a fire station or a police station to get help. And it's interesting because when the safe stations were first brought about, of course I was inclined to ask about the names. So the names were just privy to heroin and opioid addiction. And my nephew had the opportunity, this pleasure to have to use one of those safe stations. And his drug of choice at that time, I don't believe was an opiate or heroin, but it was PCP. So I think I found a kind of a glimpse in the system. And I said, so what do people do when they have issues with other drugs?
Right.
So where do they go?
Right.
So if I ride past somewhere that says heroin and opioid help, and I have a PCP problem, I'm not necessarily going to stop because I don't feel that they can, attain to my issue. And so I came in front of the city council and I addressed what had happened. And I had a conversation with Kevin Simmons about the name, and I had a conversation with the chief also about the name. And I said, if we want to be inclusive, we really want to be one Annapolis that we called ourselves, then we need to help everybody. And thus the name was changed to substance abuse safe stations instead of heroin and opioid safe stations. So you
were really instrumental in helping them to change that.
I was instrumental in helping
because
change
not everybody
the name.
is doing, like you said, heroin.
Yes.
Or opiates.
Yes.
Yes, yes.
Yes.
How has the laws changed?
So the laws have changed, to me actually, is we're getting more resources.
Okay.
So this isn't anything new under the sun, Argo.
Right, absolutely.
This has been going on. I have to say it. Since a certain group of people started to OD, we've seen more resources and more help readily available. But, when it was another group of people, it was called the war on drugs. We were being prosecuted and thrown in jail.
Yes.
But now it's more resources readily available for all of us. I will be instrumental in continuing to sound the alarm, whereas though we all get resources and not jail time.
Absolutely.
Because it is a disease that should be addressed and not someone have to be thrown in jail. If we have heart disease, we get it addressed.
Absolutely.
We go to a doctor. So if we have a problem with a disease called addiction, then we should be able to get the help we need and not be criminalized for it.
Absolutely. What about the mental health piece of that? Are there resources available? Because I worked at Crownsville many years ago, and when they closed Crownsville down, oh my God, they put the people in the community. They didn't get the support and help that they needed. So what we're seeing is people were not being treated for their mental health, but was being incarcerated.
Absolutely. There's a stigma with mental health, especially in the Black population.
Absolutely.
But I believe with awareness and education, I have been affected by mental health disease. My 2 daughters have mental health. I have fought tooth and nail to get them the help they've needed. Sometimes being ostracized, but never giving up. I'm glad to say that they're dealing with their illnesses, that they are seeking treatment and therapy, and it is readily more mental health services, not nearly enough. We have schools that are lacking the mental health services that they need for our kids. Some of our kids come to school traumatized, and you want me to read a book. You want me to do my lesson. But I can't do anything when I'm traumatized.
Absolutely.
So before we can move on with education, we have to address the underlying issue of all our children who are traumatized.
I totally agree, Tony, because it has affected mental illness,
Yes.
and they're raising the health awareness about mental illness.
Absolutely.
I suffered from severe depression as a teenager, even into my early adult life. And for me, it was like I was afraid to seek help.
Yes.
In fact, I really didn't even know I was depressed, but I knew something
Yes.
was wrong. I couldn't get up and go to work. I had no energy. I would lock myself in the house in the
Yes.
dark room, wouldn't answer the phone. I mean, my issues, like most people, were unresolved child issues.
Yes.
Today, as a holistic practitioner, I have people from all walks of life with all kinds of degrees, all classes, who
Yes.
have issues,
Yes.
emotional, unresolved issues that
Yes.
can lead to depression, anxiety, so forth and so on.
Absolutely.
So taking the stigma out of it.
Yes.
We are human beings. We're spiritual
Absolutely.
beings having a human experience.
And that is so
Am
true.
I right?
Absolutely.
So it is a challenge living, in the world that we're living in today because of the stress and anxiety that people are having every day.
Every day.
Every day. And some people can cope and some people can't.
Yes.
Some
Yes.
people have to use whatever. But we
Yes.
know drugs is a way to
medicate.
to numb your pain.
Yes.
So that you don't have to feel. So
Yes.
I understand that and I get that, and I just honor you so for
Yes.
being a voice. What are some of the other ills that social ills that you are now addressing? We don't have a whole lot of minutes left, but I want you
Okay.
to name some of the organizations and talk about a little bit more about affordable housing,
Okay.
because that's a problem, and
Okay.
some of the other issues that we're having in the community.
So I'm with an organization called ACT, Anne
Yes.
Arundel Connecting Together. And one of the big issues that we are having is with housing,
Yes,
fair housing,
absolutely.
substandard living conditions.
True.
I just want to applaud our county council. Just on last week, they passed the Affordable Workhouse Law.
I was there.
60 units.
I'm a witness. I was there.
Yes.
That's a great
Absolutely.
step forward.
It's
we're
a great,
we're,
it's a
we're
great
moving
step
the
forward.
needle.
It's a great step forward. But what I was baffled about is that so many people
The pushback.
came forward against it.
The pushback. I was
60
there.
units.
Yes.
But it is my belief that I don't care what economic status you are, that everybody needs to be living in safe and decent environment, and that we are to hold these landlords who we license accountable
Absolutely.
for the conditions that some of us have been living in.
We're talking about the city of Annapolis and HACA.
Absolutely.
Because those are the landlords of public housing.
Absolutely.
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 I went on a tour of Newtown 20.
Yes.
I was appalled at the living conditions of my brothers and sisters there.
Yes.
And I did speak up because my great nephew died from black mold in military housing in Hawaii. And that was no more than 2 or 3 years ago. And for them not to really do anything, move the people out, because we know mold is insidious.
Yes.
And
Absolutely.
children, because their immune systems are not fully developed, are more susceptible
Yes.
to respiratory problems.
Yes.
And it's a simple test to go get tested.
Absolutely.
But it was like, it felt, the elected officials were there, but it fell on, deaf ear. a year later, here we go with a lawsuit.
Here we go again.
Yeah,
You
talk
know,
about that.
it's interesting because ACT has been organizing with the Woodside community.
Okay.
And we have residents who have stood up and said enough is enough.
Yes.
And I just want to shout them out. Dominique,
Yes.
Tia, Barbara, Kirby, Janice have really stood up for themselves. They have been the trailblazers for this fair housing law, for the affordable housing. We've actually had meetings with the county executive to tell them the initiatives that we wanted. And he is standing to his word. He is doing what he said he would do. Our county councilwoman, Lisa Rodvian,
Right.
is doing what she said she would do. I can't say it enough that if we are to be one Annapolis, it has to be one Annapolis for us all.
Absolutely. And the fact that the grassroots people are coming together
Yes,
and holding the elected officials
absolutely.
accountable.
Absolutely.
Now, Tony, why is it important for us to get involved in the political process and perhaps consider becoming a community servant? Or, whatever we can do to
Yes.
make a difference. Why is it important for people to get informed and involved?
It is important for us to be informed and get involved because people can tell us anything. But it's one thing about knowing for yourself. And politically, that's where the laws are happening. It's one thing to get at the table, but it's another thing to get at the table and make a deal.
Right.
And it's another thing to get a law passed. So it's not enough just to be a community advocate, but we also have to be at the decision-making table.
Absolutely.
So I'm trying to be a community advocate and also on the decision-making side. In 2017, I ran for public office.
Yes, you did. I
My
remember
first
that.
time ever dealing with politics
Absolutely.
because I was called by God to run for public office. And I would like to say I lost against the 11-year incumbent in the primary with 17 votes.
I remember that. So, a few comments. Do you have any more comments? Because, I see you moving in that direction again.
Yes.
We're just about out of time. So, do you have a final comment that you'd like to make to our viewers?
Yes. First, I want to thank you for giving me this opportunity. But the last comment that I want to stress is that the only way we're going to combat the ills of what's going on in this city, this county, this world is if we unite together.
Absolutely.
The civil rights movement didn't happen with just a few people, but all of us who didn't even look like each other
Absolutely.
came together for a cause. And if we can do that today, what would the world look like?
Well, on that note, Ms. Tony, thank you so much for being
Thank
my
you.
very special guest today.
Thank you.
And as you always say, teamwork makes the dream work. So
Yes.
thank you so much. And thank you for watching Your Health is Your Wealth. Remember, in this very present moment, we do have the power to take charge of our life and our health. And make it a great day.